Two fleets went into the Veil Nebula. Two ships came out 15 days later, side by side, and the story of those 15 days is the strangest duel in naval history. It began with mutual annihilation. The human Third Squadron and an enemy battle group met at the nebula's edge on the last day of autumn and fought one of those battles that history files under Pyrrhic and sailors file under Never Again. 6 hours of fire inside the blinding dust. When it ended, both battle lines were wreckage, both flagships were gone, and the survivors' pods were scattering toward the shipping lanes. 2 warships remained whole. Both were stealth pickets, the quiet daggers that fleets post wide of the line. The human ship was the Whisper, Captain Aaron Wild commanding 90 crew, built to be a shadow. The enemy ship was her Mirror, a silent class hunter the humans had codenamed the Held Breath. Each captain, rising back toward the battle's grave, understood the same situation at the same moment. The fleets were dead, the pods were helpless. Whichever picket survived, the other would own the nebula and the wreckage and the fate of every drifting survivor of both sides. Each also understood, with professional certainty, that the other picket was out there. Stealth ships know their own kind, the way owls know owls. Wild gathered his officers in a control room lit only by instruments and set the rules of the next 9 days in one quiet sentence. Somewhere in this cloud is the best crew their navy owns, hunting the best crew ours does. Nobody transmits, nobody vents, nobody dreams loudly. Gentlemen, the battle is over. The duel has started. The Veil Nebula is the worst place in known space to find anything, which makes it the purest arena imaginable for 2 ships whose whole purpose is to not be found. Sensors drown in the dust, light scatters, heat smears into the general glow. A stealth duel in open space is chess. In the Veil, it was chess in the dark by touch against a mirror. Wild fought it with silence and patience. The Whisper drifted on minimum power, engines cold, riding the nebula's own currents, listening. Her crew went to soft routine, padded shoes, no maintenance hammering. The cook served cold rations so the galley's heat signature would not bloom. 90 people learned to live like held breath, which everyone aboard appreciated as ironic given the enemy's name. The first contact came on day 2. A whisper of compressed dust, the pressure ghost. A hull leaves when it moves too fast through the cloud, caught by the sonar-like sense the pickets used in nebulae. The enemy was north, high, moving crosswise, hunting. What followed was 11 hours of the slowest combat ever fought. The Whisper eased into the shadow of a dust reef. The held breath quartered the area like a hound working a field, close enough at the nearest pass that the human sensor operators could count the harmonic of her drive dampers. Nobody fired. Firing meant revealing, and revealing meant dying, and both crews knew it. On day 3, the Whisper found the enemy's trap. A rescue beacon, human-made, salvaged from the battle wreckage, transmitting a distress call at the edge of a clear pocket. Bait, laid with terrible cunning, because no human captain leaves a beacon unanswered. Wild studied it for an hour. Then he answered it with a trap of his own. The Whisper's longboat, rigged to drift toward the beacon like a cautious rescue craft, while the Whisper herself circled the pocket's blind side to catch the hunter that came to catch the rescuer. The held breath never came. Her captain had watched the longboat's approach, judged it exactly 1 degree too confident, and declined. In the log, Wild kept for the inquiry he assumed would follow, he wrote the entry that gave the duel its name in 2 academies. Day 3. My opponent respects me too much to be fooled, and I return the compliment. We are 2 locked doors testing each other's handles. The Veil has never been this quiet or this loud. The stakes surfaced on day 4 in the form of arithmetic. No captain can silence. Air. The Whisper had fought a 6-hour fleet action before the duel began, and battle damage had cost her 2 recycler banks. Running silent meant running the scrubbers slow. The engineering officer laid the numbers before Wild without comment, because they made their own argument. 9 days of breathable margin at silent routine. less if they maneuvered hard. The nebula's exits were 3 days' quiet drift away, but exiting meant crossing the open lanes where a waiting hunter would hold every advantage. And the pods were out there. That was the other column of the arithmetic. Hundreds of survivors from both fleets, drifting in the dust with their own dwindling air, unrecoverable by anyone, while 2 stealth ships held the nebula in mutual checkmate. Every silent day the duel continued. The wreckage field survivors paid for it. Wild's officers split, quietly, in the way of tired crews. Break for the exit and risk the crossing, or find the held breath and finish it, which required the one thing stealth doctrine forbade: taking a risk to force contact. Wild chose a third thing, and it is the reason the duel is taught rather than merely remembered. He began rescuing pods, silently. The Whisper crept through the wreckage margins at drift speed, and her crew brought survivors aboard through the docking collar in the dark. Human pods first, then, on day 5, because the arithmetic of air does not check allegiance, an enemy pod, 3 unconscious crew, half frozen, taken aboard and treated and confined without one transmission. It cost margin. Every rescue was noise risked and air spent. The engineering officer updated his numbers grimly after each one. And on day 6, the sensor room reported something that made Wild stand very still at the plot. A human pod, one the Whisper had tracked and marked for the next quiet pass, was gone, recovered, cleanly, silently, professionally. Somewhere in the dust, the held breath was doing the same thing. Day 6 and 7 became the strangest passage of the duel. 2 invisible ships stalking each other through a graveyard while both, without acknowledgement, gathered the graveyard's living. The evidence accumulated in absences. Pods. The Whisper approached were sometimes already empty, collars kissed by a docking ring of enemy gauge, thermal blankets left folded, and once, unmistakably deliberate, a human survival ration tucked into the empty couch like a calling card. Meaning, your man was alive, we have him, he is fed. Wild answered in kind. The next enemy pod his crew emptied, they left an enemy ration bar and the pod's log slate, annotated in careful trade tongue. 3 souls aboard Whisper. Stable. 1 required surgery. Surgery successful. It was, his log records, the only conversation of the duel, conducted in gestures inside a hunt. Neither side would pause, because neither captain could afford to believe the other's mercy was not also strategy. Every rescue was real. Every rescue was also bait, cover, positioning. Both things were true at once, which is the nebula the whole war lived in, Wild wrote, and I am past being surprised that we have built a ceasefire out of stalking each other. The near collision came on day 7 at the wreck of the human flagship. Both captains had marked it. Big wrecks hold survivors deepest. Both ships crept to it in the same watch, from opposite sides drifting the last kilometers dark, and docked at opposite ends of the broken hull within 40 minutes of each other, neither aware. For 3 hours, rescue parties from both crews worked the same wreck, decks apart, separated by vacuum and armor and luck, close enough that the Whisper's boarding team twice froze at sounds in the wreck's bones. They charitably logged as settling debris. It was not settling debris. The enemy team's logs, compared years later at a reunion the veterans of both crews still hold, recorded the same sounds, logged with the same charity. The 2 ships slipped away from opposite ends of the wreck in the same hour, each carrying rescued crew of both species. Each captain convinced the flagship's far end had felt somehow occupied, neither willing to spend the noise of investigating. 70 years later, the joint memorial at the wreck site is shaped as 2 docking collars, facing away from each other, 3 decks apart. On day 8, the duel turned toward its end, because air always wins arguments. The Whisper's margin had thinned past caution into commitment. Rescues had filled her spare berths and halved her reserve. The engineering officer's daily arithmetic now ended at a wall 4 days out, and the wall had 1 door. The nebula's southern exit, 3 days drift, then the open lane crossing where a patient hunter would hold every card. Wild committed to the run. And in committing, he faced the tactical problem that had circled the whole duel like a shark. To cross the open lane alive, he needed to know where the held breath was. After 8 days, he possessed exactly one hard fact about her, and he turned it over for hours at the plot before he saw what it meant. The fact was this: in 8 days of the most patient hunting two navies could produce across a dozen near contacts, the held breath had never once taken a shot. Neither had the Whisper, but Wilde knew his own reasons. Twice, reviewing the logs, his officers had identified moments when the enemy's position, briefly and imperfectly triangulated, would have permitted a torpedo solution against the Whisper. Not a good solution, a possible one. The kind a hunting captain with a full magazine at least considers, and the consideration leaves traces: a door's open thermal flicker, a targeting sweep, something. Nothing. Ever. Not once in 8 days. The sensor chief, an old submariner's granddaughter who had spent the duel treating the enemy ship as a personality, said it out loud at the plot on the 8th evening, the sentence that unlocked the 9 days. "Captain, she has never opened her tube doors, not at the bait pocket, not at the flagship wreck. We have been terrified for 8 days of a ship that has never once armed. Sir, what if she can't?" Wilde stood at the plot for a long moment, reviewing 9 days in the new light, and the shape of the truth assembled itself, enormous and absurd. The fleet action. 6 hours of desperate fire before the duel ever began. The Whisper had emptied her own magazines in that battle, every torpedo spent in the first hours, a fact so shameful to a hunting captain that Wilde had ordered it, treated as the ship's most classified secret. He had spent 9 days bluffing with empty tubes. What if the mirror was a mirror all the way down? The 9th day opened with the highest stakes decision of Aaron Wilde's career, and he took it against every regulation in the stealth manual. If he was wrong, transmitting meant dying. His position revealed an armed hunter 3 days from the exit he had to use, a ship full of rescued survivors of 2 species spent for nothing. If he was right, 2 empty ships were about to spend their last days of air stalking each other to mutual suffocation in a nebula full of drifting survivors who would run out of everything while their only rescuers played the perfect game. He put it to his officers because 9 days of silence had made the crew a parliament. The vote took 5 minutes. The sensor chief spoke for the room. "Sir, she has fed our people and we have stitched hers. If she is armed and kills us for talking, then I have badly misjudged a lady I have never met, and I am prepared to be embarrassed about it very briefly." At 0800 ship time, day 9, the Whisper did the unthinkable. She lit her running lights, all of them, blazing in the dust like a carnival, and transmitted in the clear on the general band, Wilde's own voice, unencrypted, a message drafted with the whole mess deck's editorial input. "Held breath. This is Whisper. 9 days, and my compliments. You are the finest ship I have never seen. I am going to tell you a secret and trust you with 90 lives and 41 of your own people currently aboard and doing well. My torpedo tubes have been empty since the fleet action. I have hunted you for 9 days with nothing but theater. If yours are loaded, this transmission is my last, and I ask you to recover my survivors, who are blameless. If yours are empty, then, Captain, we have been 2 unloaded pistols circling a graveyard, and I propose we stop because the graveyard needs us." Silence for 11 minutes, the longest of the 9 days. The Whisper's crew stood at stations lit up like a target, listening to dust. Then the reply, in accented but immaculate fleet standard, a voice they would all come to know. Whisper held breath. "Confirm empty since the 2nd hour of the battle. I have hunted you with paperwork and posture. Captain, I have been terrified of you for 9 days, and I have never been so pleased to surrender a professional reputation. Proposing rendezvous at the flagship wreck. I believe we both know the way." And out of the dust 2 kilometers to port, close enough that the whole bridge crew flinched, the held breath lit her running lights. She had been alongside for 6 hours. Her captain, the log showed, had been drafting the same confession. The rendezvous at the flagship wreck is the image the academies keep. Two stealth ships, the quietest killers of two navies, docked nose to nose in full running lights in the middle of the Vale, hatches open, crews meeting in the collar with the particular hilarity of people who have been terrified of each other for 9 days and are done. The captains met in the Whisper's wardroom. The enemy commander was older than her voice, grey-crested, and she opened with the professional courtesy that became the reunion toast for the rest of both crews' lives. "Show me the empty tubes," she said. "I require the humiliation to be mutual and documented." They inspected each other's magazines, formally, like treaty powers, and signed each other's logs beneath the entries, and then they did the work. Two ships that had spent 9 days as ghosts became, in one watch, the loudest things in the nebula. Active sensors at full sweep, rescue beacons answered in the open. The combined crews ran recovery operations around the clock for 6 days, the Whisper's surgeons and the Held Breath's medics working the same triage line. Each ship's rescued survivors pooled and nursed, regardless of gauge or grammar. They brought out 311 souls. 170 human, 141 of the enemy, every recoverable pod in the wreckage field, the last of them on air so thin the medics called it a resurrection. The two ships left the Vale on the 15th day, side by side, each escorting the other through the lane crossing that neither could have survived alone against a real hunter, and made rendezvous with the Armistice Commission, whose existence neither crew had known of, the war having ended with cosmic timing on day 6 of their duel. The commissioners, confronted with 2 enemy warships arriving in formation, crews intermingled, holds full of each other's rescued, asked the question. Commissions ask, who is the prisoner of whom? The two captains, the transcript records, looked at each other for a moment. "We have been discussing that for 6 days, Wilde said. "We have agreed that the answer is yes." The 9 days entered the curricula of both fleets within a year, and it is taught, unusually, as 2 different lessons that annoy 2 different audiences. The tacticians teach the duel itself because before the joke was known, the hunt was flawless. 9 days of positioning, bait, counterbait, and discipline by 2 crews at the peak of the art, and every maneuver holds up under analysis. The bait pocket, the flagship near miss, the drift lines. Stealth officers of both navies still walk the recorded plots the way climbers study a famous face. The annoying part, for the tacticians, is the ending, which demonstrates that the finest positional play of the century was conducted by 2 unloaded ships, and that neither the plots nor the sensors nor 9 days of genius ever detected the only fact that mattered. The strategists teach the ending and are annoyed by the duel. Their lesson is carved over the wargaming hall at the Human Staff College in Wilde's own after-action phrasing. Deterrence is theatre performed by the terrified for the terrified. It worked on me for 9 days from an empty magazine. Consider, before your next arms request, what else in the enemy's arsenal is theatre and what in yours. Then consider that the truth only surfaced when one frightened actor chose to say lines that were not in the play. The 2 crews, for their part, ignored both lessons and kept the third one, the one they administer personally at the joint reunion held every year at the Vale Memorial. New stealth officers of both fleets are brought to the reunion by tradition, and at some point in the evening, a veteran of either crew, by rotation, tells the story from inside, ending always at the same place. Three half-frozen strangers brought aboard a ship. Those strangers' navy had built weapons to kill. That was the day the duel was actually decided, the veterans say. Everything after was 2 crews discovering they had already surrendered. To the arithmetic of air, which does not check allegiance. Then the toast. In 2 languages, glasses of both fleets raised to the quietest battle ever fought. To empty tubes, and full boats. The two captains never served against each other again, the armistice holding and instead conducted over the following 30 years, the most consequential correspondence in the history of either navy. It began as professional courtesy, log excerpts exchanged so each could annotate the other's 9 days. It became a joint memoir, then a doctrine, then an institution. The Veil Protocol, drafted by two retired stealth captains at a kitchen table on a neutral station, adopted eventually by both fleets, governs to this day the conduct of isolated warships after fleet actions. Its clauses are pure 9 days. Recovery of survivors takes precedence over engagement. Rescued personnel of any allegiance are logged, and their status transmitted when tactically possible. And Clause 9, the famous one, the Empty Tubes Clause, which requires any commander whose armament state has become theatre to weigh, formally, in the log, the cost of the performance against the lives adrift in the audience. Both navies fought the protocol's adoption. Both navies' veterans forced it through, the 9 days cruise testifying at every hearing, 311 rescued survivors and their descendants writing letters that no admiralty could survive ignoring. The Held Breath's captain died first, full of years, and her fleet did something without precedent. It invited a foreign officer to speak at the interment of a stealth commander, a caste whose funerals outsiders never see. Aaron Wild, 90, stood in the enemy's hall of quiet and gave the eulogy both fleets, now quote, "I knew her 9 days as an enemy and 30 years as a colleague, and I am here to correct the record on the only point that matters. History says our duel ended in a draw between empty ships. False. I have reviewed the logs for 3 decades, and I can prove she won. On day 5, I rescued her people because my conscience required it. On day 3, she had already spared my longboat crew, a real crew I learned later, not the drone I logged, because her conscience required it. She was 2 days ahead of me in the only competition that was real." He laid on her marker the item her will had requested, the one now displayed beside its twin in the Joint Museum. The Whispers Magazine Infantry, Day 1. Certified empty. Signed by both captains at a wreck in a nebula at the end of the quietest battle ever fought. The Veil Nebula is a preserve now, by joint decree, the wrecks of the two fleets left where they lie as a sealed memorial, and only 2 classes of vessel may enter. Rescue ships, always, by the protocol's first clause. And once a year, 2 stealth ships, one from each navy, crewed by that year's finest graduates of the 2 academies who were given the old plots, the old drift lines, and the old rules. 9 days. Total silence. Find each other. It is the most coveted exercise in either fleet, and it has a peculiarity that every graduate discovers on day 1, sealed in the exercise orders, and none has ever spoiled for the next class. The torpedo tubes of both exercise ships are welded open, empty, visibly, permanently, by design. The graduates spend 9 days learning what the 2 old crews learned, that the hunt is real even when the teeth are not, that fear needs no ammunition, that 2 ships can stalk each other through a graveyard, both merciful, both terrified, both magnificent, and that the whole lethal architecture of the game can rest unexamined on a fact nobody checked. On the 9th day, by tradition, whichever crew first transmits in the clear, lights blazing, and proposes rendezvous, is judged the winner. Not for finding the other ship, for being first to stop. The exercise has run for 40 years. The record for the earliest transmission is held by a young enemy fleet commander in year 31, who lit her lights on day 2, and whose transmission is now printed in both fleets' manuals under the heading Doctrine, Correct Application of. Unknown ship, this is Held Breath 2. My tubes are empty, yours are empty. The whole nebula knows it, and there are better uses for 9 days. I propose we go find something worth being quiet about. Somewhere, 2 old crew's descendants like to think a captain and her colleague heard that and stood down at last and let the dust settle over the quietest battlefield there ever was. Empty tubes, full boats. Still the standing orders. Still enough. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.